Good evening. I'm a professor at Harvard Business School where I teach a class titled Entrepreneurial Finance. And I began teaching this class with some background information about myself and my family. I tell the story about my two daughters. Specifically, I talk about my youngest daughter, Arielle Rogers, who graduated from Princeton University 7 years ago, where she majored in aerospace and mechanical engineering. Prior to graduation, she told me, she called me and said, "Dad, upon graduation, I'd like to go out to Hollywood to work in the arts industry." My first thought was, I just spent over $250,000 on your education. You majored in engineering, and this is what I get. But I've never really cared what my daughters do in life. I just want them to be happy and be able to take care of themselves. The thing I do care about is that they give back. And I said to Arielle, you know you have an obligation to give back. You are the granddaughter of a woman who never finished high school. You have an obligation to give back from the community that we came from. And so with that, she said, "Dad, what should I do?" I said, "I think you should come home to Chicago and work at a charter school by the name of Urban Prep." The title of my speech has changed from what you see in the literature. My speech is now titled Black Lives Matter, How Will You Make a Difference? So Arielle did, in fact, come back to Chicago. And she came back to Chicago and worked at a charter school called Urban Prep Charter School. In America, ladies and gentlemen, one of our major crises is the fact that African American and Latino males are not graduating from high school. They graduate at a rate of less than 50% after 5 years. And what do we know about if you don't get a high school degree? We know that there's a great chance that your next step will probably be prison. 80% of the people in prison do not have a high school degree. Over 70% of the people in prison are African American or Latino. So what's the solution to the problem? And why should you care? The reason you should care is because, if nothing else, this is a very costly institution. It costs more on average to incarcerate a man than it does to send a person to Harvard. It costs in excess of $50,000 on average to incarcerate a man. In New York, it's about $150,000. So the reality is that we all who have been blessed have a responsibility of finding solutions to the problem, and that's what my child was required to do. I introduced her to this great social entrepreneur by the name of Tim King. Tim King said, "I will be a solution and help solve this problem." He had experience creating Catholic schools in the urban community. He said, "I'm going to take that experience and create a public school that focuses on African American boys from the poorest community of Chicago." Tim King, I called him into my office when I was a professor at Northwestern University. I called him into my office and asked him, "What are you doing?" He told me what he was doing, and that the first school he was going to create was going to be in my old neighborhood where I was born and raised. He said, "We're going to create a school that's on the model of what I did at Leo High School, a Catholic school that had phenomenal success catering to African American boys from low-income communities. The difference is there won't be any tuition for this school." And so I said to Tim, "I'll do everything that I can to support you." He said, "What we're going to do is we're going to have a school, because most of the African American boys, they come to school to the 9th grade and they're reading at the 6th grade level. Their math is at the 5th grade level." He said, "Steve, we have to do something to remedy this situation in an emergency." He said, "What we're going to do is we're going to create a school where the boys will go to school 2 extra hours a day compared to what they're required to do in public schools. They'll go to school on Saturdays as well." He said, "We have to catch up. We have to help these boys catch up." And he said, "The other thing that we're going to do is As long as they don't bring a gun to school, we'll never suspend them. Whatever behavior they exhibit, we know that that behavior is reflective of their socioeconomic circumstances. And the reality is, what we're going to do is, we're going to put our arms around these boys and we're going to love them until they love themselves enough to finish school. We're also going to arm them with the tools needed to succeed after they graduate from our school. So my daughter Ariel left Princeton University and went straight to the south side of Chicago and worked for Urban Prep Charter School, where she taught mathematics. She taught mathematics, had a great experience, was selected Professor of the Year, and the results of that school are phenomenal. Urban Prep now has 5 schools in the Chicago community, and what happened 6 years ago was that that first graduating class was completed. 100% of the boys who began Urban Prep 4 years earlier graduated. The next year, 100% of the boys graduated. The third year, 100% of the boys graduated. If you go to that school, you'll see boys walking around and they have on blue blazers, white shirts, neckties, and green khaki pants. They look like the boys who come from the private schools that many of you matriculated at. But these are boys who come from the worst circumstances in the country. And what happens when we wrap our arms around them and we love them and we give them the tools to excel? They prosper. They graduate. 100% of the boys who graduated went on to college. And that has been the case for the last 3 years. So yes, my friends, Black Lives Matter, and my daughter was a part of contributing to the uplifting of the black community. And my question to you is, what are you going to do to make a difference in other people's lives with this blessing that you have with being at Harvard University? Thank you very much. Have a great day.